2. Extracts from a Catharist Gospel, derived from the admissions of Bavilus, a pupil of the elect Belibasta, and used by the Manichaean heretics of South France in the 12th through the 13th centuries, together with the Ascension of Isaiah. It may depend on the lost Gospel of the 12, and is said by F. C. Conibert to resemble the known traces of the Gospel of the Egyptians of the 2nd century. Thereupon the Father began to write a book, which he composed in the space of 40 years. In this book were written in detail the sufferings, losses, sorrows, poverty, infirmity, shame, injustices, envy, hatred, malice, and, generally speaking, all the penalties which can befall men in this life. And therein it was stated that he who was willing to endure all the aforesaid penalties and to teach them also should be a son of the Heavenly Father. And when the Holy Father began the book, Isaiah the prophet began to prophesy that a branch or bow was to come who should redeem human souls. And when the Holy Father had composed that book, he placed it in the midst of the heavenly spirits who had remained with him in heaven, and said, "He who shall fulfill the things which are written in this book shall be my son." And many of the heavenly spirits, wishing to be sons of the Holy Father, and to be honored above the rest, went up to that book and opened it. But when they read therein the penalties which he must needs suffer who should desire to come among men, and uplift the human race, after reading a little in that book, they fell fainting in a swoon. None of them was willing to forfeit the glory he possessed, and subject himself to the penalties of this life, in order to become the Son of God. Then seeing this, the Holy Father said, "So then there is not one of you desires to be my son." Then one of the spirits standing by, who is called Jesus, rose up and said, "I myself am willing to be son of the Father, and to complete all things which are written in that book." When he went up to the book, and opened it, and read therein 4 or 5 pages, and he fell in a swoon beside the book, and so remained for 3 days and nights. Then having awakened from his swoon, he grieved much and mourned. But because he had promised that he would fulfill these things which were contained in that book, and because it was right for him not to lie, he told the Father that he himself desired to be his son, and to fulfill all things which were written in that book, however grievous they might be. Then he descended from heaven, and appeared as a newly born boy in Bethlehem. After baptism by the great demon John, the devil carried Jesus hanging on his neck. And he was in Samaria with the blessed Peter, and there they ate bread and fishes, that is to say, God himself and the blessed Peter did so. And from the table were taken up 12 baskets of what remained. The Son of God said that a man should in no wise swear, neither by heaven, for a man could not make one star in it small or great, nor by his own head, because a man could not make one hair on his head white or black. A certain woman came to the Son of God, and said that her daughter was frenzied, and the Son of God placed his hand on her daughter's head and healed her, which healing was nothing else than this, that the soul of the daughter went out of her body, and that he healed the soul. For the Son of God did not free them from bodily infirmities, but only from sins, which are the infirmities of the soul. And this is why the Son of God was a good healer, because he drew souls to salvation. And he called the Jews Pharisees, hypocrites, who stand in the gate of the kingdom, but neither entered the kingdom, nor let those enter who desired to go in. He said to them that he was going to his Father, and that he would return to them on a certain day which he fixed for them, between the 3rd hour and noon, and that he would find them in the house of Simon Bar-Jonah. And when he had said this, the Pharisees appeared on the scene, together with children of the devil who were working with them, and arrested him. And all the injuries and insults which they could inflict on him, the said Pharisees and their servants did inflict upon the Son of God, so much so that a certain leper spat in his face, but he forbore from all resentment. And when he was thus spat upon by that leper, and derided and abused, he said, "Father, I only know that I am thy son, because thou didst promise me this when thou didst send me, to the end that I should be abhorred by all men, that is, that I should be a reproach to abjects among men. Then after they had mocked at him and threatened him, they set him on a cross and wounded him, and inflicted many wounds upon him. And when this had been done, he himself, without death intervening, for the Son of God could not die, ascended to the Holy Father, kneeled before him, and said, Holy Father, in obedience to thy will, I have completed all things which were written in the book thou didst write. And the Holy Father replied to him, Whereas thou hast done all things which I wrote in the book, thou shalt be my son. To whom the Son answered, Father, and what wilt thou give, that I may give myself to my friends, and to those who believe in me? And the Father himself replied that he was desirous that the same power which he had given to him, he himself should be able to give in turn to his friends, and they to others, in such a way that the said power should pass from hand to hand among the good men, and also that what he gave to them should be this, that whatever they themselves did upon earth should be done by the Father himself in heaven. These words having been uttered, he quitted the Father's presence and came down, so that on the appointed day he might appear to his friends. Now although it seemed to the Jews that the Son of God was dead, and that after death they had placed him in a sepulchre, nevertheless he was not truly dead, nor was he buried, though he seemed to be so. No sooner had those who buried him retired from the tomb than he appeared to a certain woman who was mourning for him, and he told her to approach him, because it was he himself, whose lying in the said tomb she was deploring. He told her also that he had never been dead, nor sustained any suffering or affliction, although Satan and the Jews had put it in his power for them to kill him and ill-treat him. Then on that appointed day, when Mary Magdalene and another woman were walking together, they saw an old and decrepit man coming along, walking quickly in their direction. Then they feared exceedingly, and hid themselves in 2 bushes which were beside the highway. And when that old man had passed by, Mary Magdalene put her head out of the bush and called the old man, who seemed to be a stranger. Now when the old man told her that he could not wait because he had much to do, and when she pressed him to return and speak with her, he then returned to her. She asked him if he had any news of the prophet. Then he answered, Yes, because on the day designated to his friends he himself will be with them in the house of Simon Bar-Yonah, between the 3rd hour and noon. And when she asked him if this were certain, he replied, Why, yes. Then departing from her, he immediately disappeared. And thereupon Mary Magdalene knew that the old man was the prophet. And she herself and the prophet with her gathered together the prophet's friends in the house of Simon Bar-Yonah, the apostle Thomas only excepted. Now when they were all gathered together in the said house, and already the chosen hour seemed to be passing by, Peter said to the others who thought they had been deceived, Either we are sinners, or we made a mistake about the day, for the prophet is no liar. And when they answered him that they had made no mistake about the day, Peter replied, Then it is we who are sinners, and it is because of our sins that the prophet comes not. And then he said to the rest, Seeing that we are sinners, let us try to see in what way any one of you believes in him. Thereupon they composed the symbol or creed of the apostles. And when the apostles stood waiting for the prophet throughout one evening, that prophet did come in the form of fire, and by that fire they were all illumined. And those who were ignorant of letters became so cognizant of them that none could excel them in knowledge. It was also given them that they could talk in the tongues of all races. And Thomas, who did not believe that the prophet could come, entered, and when he had come, he said that as for himself he would not believe that the prophet could come to them, unless he should put his own hand in the wound. And thereupon the prophet said to Thomas that he should put his hand in the wound. And when Thomas had done so, he said to the Son of God that he must excuse him, because he now believed that he existed, and would believe for the future. To whom the Son of God replied, Let indulgence be shown to thee, and for the future thou shalt not be unbelieving. Thomas replied to him that he would not be. When the Son of God said to all of them, Preach my words throughout the whole world, and guard yourselves from false prophets who will thrust themselves among you. For as a false prophet entered my Father's kingdom and threw it into confusion, so also will false prophets who make their way among you throw you into confusion. Yet for this they shall be heavily punished, because the Holy Father said, He that shall deceive me, it shall be pardoned him, and he that shall deceive the Son, it shall be pardoned him. But he who deceives the Holy Spirit shall have no peace or end. Then the Son of God said to his apostles that they should ask of him, and he would give to them. And this said, he divided their preaching, marking out the country wherein each one of them was to go and preach. Now to Peter he committed the church, but Peter's authority came to an end with Peter, because the Roman pontiffs who have succeeded him lack that authority which he had, for they do not preserve and hold to the faith and to the ways of the Son of God. Then Christ distributed among the disciples fishes and a honeycomb, and then he ascended into heaven, and thereafter the apostles preached throughout the world. The Son of God said when he had returned to heaven, My little ones, be not sad on this account, because you who stand in truth and justice, and not as other men, shall return otherwise to my Father's kingdom. There are 3 kinds of flesh. One is of men, and another of beast, and a third is of fishes, which is born in the water. You, my little ones, shall not eat of that flesh, save what is born in water, because such flesh is created without corruption. But other kinds of flesh are produced with corruption, and cause the flesh to be overproud. And having said the above, the Son of God said to Bar-Yonah, Let no one put his hand to my plough, unless he wishes to grasp it firmly. For he who shall give a cup of water to my little one shall be blessed, because he shall receive 100-fold and more. See therefore, if the Holy Father promises us much, yet he who shall have deceived my little ones in the matter of a single obol, his soul shall not be worth another obol. Therefore there is one who is my little one, I myself shall be with him, and where there are 2, likewise, and where there are 3, in the same way. Now the 12 apostles who descended from heaven with Christ were spiritual beings, and afterwards in the state of Samaria there were 12 baskets of fragments left over, from 5 loaves and a few fishes. Those apostles gave the said 12 baskets to 12 men, and so were created the carnal apostles, who had the same power as the spiritual, and whenever one of the spiritual apostles died, a carnal one succeeded him. 3. Extracts from the Yazidi books, long kept secret by this little-known sect of, quote, devil worshippers in the Lebanon mountains. These books still show traces of Manichaean ancestry. These fragments, dated from about 1162 and 1342 respectively, are derived from Quest, Volume 4, and they probably go back in essence to at least the 8th or 9th century. He who existed before all creatures is the angel Taus. It is he who sent the servant of Taus into this world to separate his chosen people and to make it wise and free it from ignorance and error, and that first by oral teaching, but afterwards by means of this book called Revelation, a book which no stranger to the faith may read. I was, I am, and I shall be, until the end of the eons, ruling as sovereign over the creators and looking after the interests and the doings of all who are subject to my rule. I am ready to help all who trust in me and invoke me in their need. I occupy all space. I am concerned with all the happenings which by the unbelievers are called evils, but they call them so only because they do not answer to their desires. Every age has its ruler, but he rules according to my counsel. In every century the leader of this world changes, and one after the other accomplishes his task. With perfect justice I let nature carry out everything which is in conformity with her. He who struggles against me will earn only regret and pain. However great they be, the other gods do not meddle with my affairs, and cannot hinder the execution of my decrees. The books in the hands of those who are strangers to my teaching possess no sanction, and prophets have not written them. These unfortunates have led themselves into error, leaving the way of truth and beating out their own path. Thus every one of their prophets abolishes what this predecessor has established. Moreover, the true and the false may be distinguished by experience. My retribution threatens those who speak of my covenant to the uninitiated. I reserve to myself certain things I forbid. Everything is in its time and in its place. I teach and direct in the right way all who follow follow my doctrine, and they find true delight in submitting to my precepts. I requite and reward every man according to my knowledge. In my hand is everything above, on, and underneath the earth. I allow no collision of the different worlds. I do not work against their own good, especially if their good luck is for the benefit of those who blindly follow me. I reveal myself in one way or another to those true to me. It is I who give, I who take back, who make rich and poor, who make man's happiness and follow his misfortune. But everything happens according to time and circumstance. None has a right to interfere with my doings or to resist me. I send sickness and infirmity to those who refuse to obey me. But he who tries to satisfy me does not die like other men. I do not let anyone live longer than I have determined. But if I will, I can send him back to this earth twice or thrice in rebirth. I teach without a book. I punish in the other world those who resist my laws. The children of this Adam are ignorant of what is reserved for them beyond the grave. The rule of the worlds, the revolutions of the ages, and the overthrow of their rulers have been preordained from all eternity. I do not resign my rights over any of the other gods. The four elements, the four seasons, and the four corners of the world are established for the needs of the creatures. The books of the unbelievers are received for that in them which tallies with my law. As for the rest, it is a product of their own imagination. Those who patiently suffer the pains and mishaps of this world, I shall not fail to reward in one of my worlds. I desire that all believers in me congregate into one covenant to confront the outsiders, forbearing to pronounce my name or to mention my qualities to anyone. Bestow all possible veneration upon my statute and upon my image, for it will recall my memory to you, a thing you have for years left undone. Obey my ministers, for it is they who teach you of the invisible and of all that relates to me. From the Black Book. Before the earth and the sky existed, God abode on the oceans. He had made for himself a vessel, and in it he drifted in the midst of the seas. In the beginning God created for himself a white pearl, to which he gave orders for 40 years. He then created a bird, and this sat on it for 40,000 years. Nurail created man, the animals, the birds, and the wild beasts. After that he put them into the pockets of his robe, and issued thus out of the pearl, accompanied by hosts of angels. Then he uttered a mighty cry against the pearl, and instantly it broke into 4 parts. Out of its womb sprang the water, which became the ocean. The noise became the mountains, and the dust became the hills, and the smoke the skies. At that time the earth was round and without any cleft. God created Gabriel in the shape of a bird, and he put the 4 corners of the world into his hands. Then he created a ship, wherein he remained for 30,000 years. Then he came to inhabit Lalish. He cried against the earth, and it became solid. Having become hard, it began to quake. Then he took one piece of the pearl and put it under the earth to strengthen it, and another piece he put on the door of the sky to adorn it. It is in this portion of the pearl the sun and moon are set. Then around these 2 luminaries he scattered the powdered pieces that had been left over from the breaking of the pearl, and they became the stars in the firmament, the whole being suspended from the sky. Thereafter God ascended into the skies, condensed them, and fixed them without pillars. He made the fruit trees and plants of the earth come forth from the soil. It is also he who made the mountains rise, to make the surface of the earth more pleasant. He locked up with a key the earth and the abysses. He established then the heavenly throne, and placed it on the carpet of glory. And then he took his pen in hand, and wrote down the events of creation. Then he begat 6 gods from his own essence, and from his light, creating them in the same way as a man lights one lamp at another. The first god said to the second, I have drawn from the non-existing the sky alone. Ascend thou into it, and create something else. He ascended, and became the sun. Then he said the same thing to the third, and he became the moon. The fourth constituted himself the sphere of the heavenly bodies. The 5th proclaimed himself as the morning star, and the 6th changed himself into the atmosphere.